En el complejo tablero de la geopolítica actual, pocos analistas poseen la claridad y la experiencia de campo de nuestro invitado de hoy. Carl Bildt no solo fue primer ministro de Suecia y el que guió a ese país hacia la Unión Europea, sino un diplomático clave en la resolución de los conflictos en los Balcanes, y es hoy una de las voces más autorizadas y críticas sobre el futuro de la autonomía estratégica europea. Como copresidente del Consejo Europeo de Relaciones Exteriores, Bildt observa con agudeza un mundo que parece fracturarse nuevamente en áreas de influencia, desde la creciente presión sobre la soberanía de Groenlandia y la militarización del Ártico hasta el incierto desenlace de la guerra de Ucrania y el papel de Europa que busca un lugar entre las potencias de Washington, Pekín y Moscú. Su perspectiva es esencial para entender si el multilateralismo que conocimos está llegando a su fin. Es un honor darle la bienvenida al programa al ex primer ministro de Suecia, Carl Bildt. Carl, thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you. How are things in Mexico City?
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's very interesting to be able to get your take on many issues of international politics. If you wish, let's start talking about Greenland.
Yes.
Bueno, pues en la introducción le propongo al señor Bildt que hablemos de varios temas de la agenda internacional y vamos a comenzar con el de Groenlandia. Yo estaré traduciendo lo que platiquemos con él. Mr. Bildt, you have warned that Europe must prepare for a serious confrontation if the U.S. persists in its territorial interest in Greenland. Do you believe that the EU possesses the political and military capacity to back Denmark if this pressure scales from the diplomatic to the economic or military sphere?
Well, I sincerely hope it's not going to escalate into the military field, but you never know. And I don't think we will have military confrontation with the United States. But it is difficult to see how the Americans will do such a thing. But primarily, this is a battle being fought in the political and diplomatic area. And you saw that in the meeting in Washington yesterday, and there will be a continuation of that.
Bueno, nos dice señor Bildt que duda y espera que esto vaya a llegar a la confrontación militar entre Estados Unidos y la Unión Europea y que pues tiene la esperanza en que pueda resolverse desde el campo diplomático. Is Trump right when he says that if the U.S. doesn't acquire one way or another Greenland, it will be Russia or China that will do that?
No, he is not right. He is not right on virtually anything that he says about Greenland, as a matter of fact. And he says that there are sort of loads of Russian and Chinese ships around, military ships around Greenland. There's nothing of the sort. Pure fantasy. And say that Russia wanted to occupy Greenland. They don't have in the vicinity of the resources that would be necessary to do that. We have resources in NATO to defend Greenland without any major problems. But as said, there are no signs of them having any such intention. And they don't have the capability. And the same, of course, applies to China.
Le pregunto al señor Bildt si tiene razón Trump cuando dice que si Estados Unidos no adquiere Groenlandia de una manera o de otra, lo van a hacer Rusia o China. Me dice que Trump no tiene razón en nada de lo que dice de Groenlandia, que son fantasías lo que dijo de una isla rodeada por barcos chinos y rusos, y que ni siquiera Rusia ni China tendrían la capacidad militar de ocupar Groenlandia porque la OTAN tiene justamente la capacidad de impedirlo. Do you think that a U.S. Occupation of Greenland or a U.S. insistence in occupying Greenland would mean the end of NATO, Mr. Bildt?
In some sort of way, it clearly would be, but exactly how that will materialize remains to be seen. I hope we will never enter into that particular area because an occupation, I'm not quite certain. I mean, militarily, of course, they can send a company of soldiers into Nuuk. Nuuk is a very small place. It's 20,000 people. It's roughly a third of all the inhabitants of are going to arrest the members of the parliament, send them to Guantanamo or whatever? Are they going to send all of the policemen who are Danish on the first flight? Are they going to cease this, try to force the Greenlanders to cease being Danish citizens with all of the rights that EU citizens, with all of the rights associated with that? Are they going to take over running of the welfare state in Greenland? I don't think they have thought a second about these issues.
Bueno, le pregunto si significaría el fin de la OTAN que Estados Unidos ocupara Groenlandia y me dice, bueno, vamos a ver cómo lo hacen si es que lo quieren hacer. Evidentemente tienen la fuerza militar para ocupar Nuuk, que es una ciudad de 20,000 habitantes, pero ¿qué es lo que van a hacer? ¿Van a detener a todos los miembros del Parlamento? ¿Los van a mandar a Guantánamo? ¿Van a detener a todos los daneses en la isla? Creo que no ha pensado muy bien Estados Unidos cómo quiere llevar a cabo esto de hacerse de Groenlandia. Mr. Bildt, is it time for the EU to create a defense structure parallel to NATO, or would this fragment the transatlantic alliance?
It is time to build a NATO with less US, because what you can see the national security doctrine of the United States, the new one. They are downgrading the interest in the security of Europe. So I think we'll see a downgrading of the American military presence in Europe and a downgrading of their care for European security issues. So we will have to plan to take over more of those. That planning is beginning to be very serious indeed. Their concentration is going to be, I understand, on the Western Hemisphere. So Mexico and others are going to be somewhat more in focus.
Bueno, le pregunto a Carl Bildt si es tiempo de que los europeos piensen en una estructura militar distinta de la OTAN y me dice, es tiempo de que reforcemos a la OTAN con menos presencia de Estados Unidos porque de acuerdo con la directriz de seguridad internacional, de seguridad nacional que Estados Unidos dio a conocer a fines del año pasado, pues ellos se van a alejar de Europa y por cierto, nos dicen los mexicanos, se van a acercar bastante más a México y eso es algo que tenemos que tomar en cuenta los mexicanos. Mr. Bildt, given the unpredictability of the U.S. foreign policy, must Europe accept that the American nuclear umbrella is no longer an absolute guarantee and begin developing its own large-scale deterrence capabilities?
No. There are, of course, some nuclear capabilities with the British and the French, but they are not enough to balance what the Russians have in terms of nuclear capabilities. Here we are dependent upon the American nuclear deterrent, and I don't see any really reason to develop our own capabilities. We would just hope that the Americans will, because this particular situation where we have would have large-scale nuclear employment, I would hope that the Americans would be prepared to take their responsibility there.
Bueno, le pregunto si, dado que la política exterior de Estados Unidos es muy impredecible, sería tiempo de entender que ya no pueden depender de la defensa nuclear por parte de Estados Unidos y Europa tendría que construir la suya propia. Y me dice que no, es cierto que los británicos y los franceses tienen armas nucleares, pero nada que pueda acercarse a lo que tienen los rusos. Seguiremos dependiendo en ese sentido de la defensa nuclear por parte de Estados Unidos y ojalá que Estados Unidos tenga la voluntad de seguir trabajando en ello con Europa. Mr. Bildt, let me ask you about Ukraine briefly, if I may. You've pointed out that Europeans should shoulder a greater financial burden in Ukraine. To what extent is this support sustainable if domestic opinion begins to prioritize local economy crises over the defense of Ukraine?
So far, it's been going better than expected. If you look at the situation now, the Americans have ceased being any financial supporter to Ukraine. So now the burden is on the Europeans, but there are also the Canadians, the Australians, the Japanese, and others are helping also. Is this sustainable? Well, if we look at the figures, this is roughly 0.3% of GDP of the EU. and that is, in my opinion, sustainable. It is, of course, a lot of money, but I mean, most of the European countries, we are spending sort of 40-45% of GDP on public expenditure of sorts. We are saying we're going to have roughly 3.5% of defense. And I would be prepared to say to take the 0.3% out of defense and giving it to Ukraine, because the defense of Ukraine is the defense of Europe for the foreseeable future. If Ukraine can defend itself, the options of Russia when it comes to the rest of Europe they are distinctly limited. If Ukraine were to fall and be occupied by Russia, then we face a significantly more serious security threat in Europe.
Bueno, le pregunto si es sostenible el apoyo de Europa a Ucrania, apoyo militar ante la invasión rusa, ahora que Estados Unidos se ha desentendido del tema. Si no va a haber presiones sociales en Europa por necesidades locales a las cuales hacer frente. Y me dice que no, que hasta ahora ha sido sostenible el apoyo, porque no solo son los europeos, también Australia, también Canadá, también Japón han estado participando en esto, y que en realidad solo ha representado el 0.3% del Producto Interno Bruto de la Unión Europea. Y dice, podríamos tomar ese 0.3% del 3.5% que ya estamos dispuestos los europeos a invertir en defensa, y no sería ningún problema hasta ahora. Mr. Bildt, what is your take on the world being divided in spheres of influence in new geopolitics? Do you think this is really happening, that the US, China, and Russia have decided on dividing the world between themselves?
I don't think they have decided to do that, but if you look at the tendencies in their policies, it's clearly there. I mean, the Russians say that they have the right to intervene in Ukraine, which they don't. It's aggression, but they say it's sort of close to us, so we have the right to do it. And the Americans are now talking about some version of the Monroe Doctrine, which is another way of saying that countries in the vicinity of the United States have some sort of limited sovereignty. And there is a US, if it's right to intervene or whatever it is. But the US has certain rights versus these countries. I haven't heard anything like that from the Chinese, but could well happen. And that is, of course, a development that is very disturbing for virtually all small and medium-sized powers, but particularly those in the vicinity of the great powers.
Bueno, le pregunto si está de acuerdo con la visión de que Estados Unidos, Rusia y China están dividiéndose el mundo en una nueva geopolítica. Me dicen, no sé si han tomado esa decisión, pero claramente están actuando en ese sentido. Rusia está manifestando claramente y está actuando como si tuviera derecho a intervenir en Ucrania. Estados Unidos está desarrollando una nueva doctrina Monroe. No he escuchado eso de parte de los chinos, pero en todo caso es muy preocupante para las naciones medias y pequeñas, sobre todo las que tienen una cercanía geográfica con esas naciones. And finally, Mr. Bildt, you have recently suggested that the UN might need to leave the US to survive. Are we talking about the end of multilateralism as we have known it since World War II?
Well, what I talked about, whether that is a serious proposal or not, is that if the United States stops paying to the UN, and if they are blocking people to coming to UN headquarters for political talks and consultations, then I think one should seriously discuss moving UN headquarters to somewhere else. It is in New York because the US was a dominant power, still a very one, used to pay 25% of the UN budget. Everyone had the right to go to New York for meetings of the General Assembly, but now they are not paying, and they blocked, for example, the Palestinians to go to the General Assembly. Then I think it's a serious issue whether the UN headquarters long term should not be in some other part of the world. Is it the end of multilateralism? Hopefully not, but it's clearly a crisis when the US is leaving such important aspects of the World Health Organization or climate policies or whatever. It's clearly a crisis. And that means that if you look at it from the European Union point of view, we are trying to preserve whatever can be preserved of multilateralism. We are sort of updated the free trade agreement with Mexico, having the new free trade large area with Mercosur, negotiating with India, just to take examples at this present time.
Bueno, le pregunté por último qué quiso decir cuando dijo que a lo mejor había que mover la sede de Naciones Unidas de Nueva York. Y me dijo, bueno, pues si Estados Unidos no está pagando lo que debe y está impidiendo que algunas delegaciones vayan a Nueva York, quizás sea el momento de mover la sede de las Naciones Unidas. Y sobre el multilateralismo y lo que parece ser pues el fin de como lo conocíamos, dice, bueno, hay cosas preocupantes que están ocurriendo en ese sentido, pero la Unión Europea ha estado paralelamente reforzando sus acuerdos con otras naciones y bloques del mundo, como ocurre con México, con su acuerdo comercial reforzado y también con el Mercosur. Mr. Bildt, it was a great honor being able to speak to you this morning.
Pleasure, and I hope the sun shines over Mexico City.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bildt. Mr. Bildt. Bueno, ahí está la entrevista con el ex primer ministro de Suecia, Carl Bildt, que nos ha aportado, yo creo, muchos elementos para entender el panorama internacional actual. Vamos a